Hey everyone, welcome to Church Online. We are so glad that you could join us today. My name is Megan and I'm a pastor on staff here and I have the privilege of hosting the service today. For those of you that don't know, we are one church in 3 locations. So if you're ever able to join us in person, we would love for you to check out one of our campuses in Westland, Milwaukee, or Beaverton. In the meantime, we'd love to meet you and help you get connected. The best way to do that is to click on one of the links below or check out our website. Our mission as a church is to inspire people to know, love, and follow Jesus. We absolutely love our local communities and want to do whatever we can to help make a difference in the world as we learn what it means to follow Jesus together. I hope you'll find today's message challenging and encouraging, so let's lean in and engage.
Welcome to Church Online. Thanks for joining us for this series, The Greatest Stories Rarely Told. It's my pleasure to continue with you in this series. And so if this is your first time with us, we're glad that you're here. I know that you have so many options of things to listen to and to even maybe consume during the week. And so thank you for joining us. We would love to get better connected with you though, so you can click on any of the links below and maybe say yes to Jesus or ask for prayer, because we love that you're with us online, but we would love to also reach out and get to know you individually, because you have a rare story and we want to know it as well. Now, for us, as we've been going through this series, we've been looking at different texts in the Bible and some of the more rare ones. And in confession, today's text maybe isn't the rarest, but more on that in a minute. Because what we've been doing is looking at these rare stories through the lens of our core values. Now, our core values are these 3 things: sacrificial generosity, radical hospitality, and uncommon humility. Now, we spent the first couple of weeks looking at sacrificial generosity, and if you missed that, I would encourage you to go back and listen to it. Today, we are wrapping up radical hospitality, and next week, we're going to move into uncommon humility. But the thing about all 3 of these core values is we want them not to just be standalone, we want them to drive to something, and that they would all be driving towards undeniable kingdom impact. That if you and I were in any situation, were to all of a sudden be removed from it, that people would maybe our charisma and our talent and our personality, maybe that would all be missed. But what would be really, really missed is what we bring to the table as far as God's kingdom. That the way that we serve and strive after the things of Jesus would be felt as us not being there, that we would live lives with undeniable kingdom impact. Now, today, we really are wrapping up radical hospitality. And this is one of my favorite core values. And the reason is because in my household growing up, this value was demonstrated for me. My mom knows how to host well. She is the hostess with the mostest, right? And so, Mom, if you're listening to this, thanks for watching. And well, I know that you are watching this because you're my mom. And so thanks for doing that. But thank you for modeling this well for us growing up. You see, we were always having people over to our house, whether they were friends or family or strangers, or as we got into sports, we were hosting dinners and after season parties, or then as we got through high school, there was graduation parties that we would host, and then wedding showers and baby showers, and our house was always a hive of activity and hosting and hospitality. And here's what I've learned: it's a lot of work. Like hospitality takes a ton of work. Like, just take a wedding shower, for instance. Now, I don't know how you do wedding showers here because my kids are all young enough. We're not hosting those yet. But where I grew up, like, a wedding shower was a thing. It was a big deal. Like, you gathered together a team of people to try to pull this off because you had to make decisions on what was the decor going to look like, what was the food menu and the drink options. Is it going to have a theme or not going to have a theme? Do the invitations go out? And if they do, who's going to design them and what goes on them? Or do we just send them digitally? What's the setup? What's the teardown? What's the cleanup, both before and after? Because you know if you're going to host, you got to clean the house and get it ready to host people. And then by the time the party's over, you are exhausted and there's the sink full of dishes to do. You see, hosting and hospitality, it costs us something and it's tiring, which is maybe why so many of us struggle to do it. Because we view it as a task to do, not a way of life to live. You see, but my mom, this wasn't just things that she did. This was just who she was. This was a part of her calling, part of her way of sending the gospel forward into other people's lives. You see, even in the church, Christians specifically have always valued hospitality. If you do a little bit of study on church history, you can see time after time where hospitality was just a part of what we did. For instance, one example of this would be the monks in Scotland. If you were to be traveling through Scotland and you were going to come to a monastery where there were some monks that were there, you would meet sort of a gatekeeper or a porter really close to the entrance of that community. And when you met them, their chief role was to welcome guests and then introduce them to the entire community that was there around them. And everyone would welcome you in. Every single person there lived out hospitality, that they would welcome you in. And so the person in charge of the monastery would start asking you questions about you, or where are you from and where are you going and how can they help? Because they wanted to figure out, are there needs that we can meet? If you needed prayer, they would pray for you. If you needed safety, then they would provide that for you as a safe place to be. If it was shelter, then you would be taken to the guest house where someone would have clean sheets waiting for you. If it was food, then they would give you a meal. But not only that, if it was a monastery, they were in the middle of a fast, everyone would stop the fast in order to eat with you so that you would feel welcome in their midst. And everyone that showed up would get their feet washed, because everybody was walking miles and miles from one place to another. And so every person had their feet washed, whether it was a stranger or a seeker, a pilgrim, a refugee, or a friend. If you showed up, they were going to wash your feet, because for them, hospitality was not a task to be done. It was a way of life. In fact, they had a rule about this that they followed where they said, all guests who present themselves are to be welcomed as Christ is welcomed. For he himself said, I was a stranger and you welcomed me in. You see, it's that heartbeat of radical hospitality, which is why I love this definition, that hospitality is not so much a task as a way of living our lives and of sharing ourselves. And that hospitality is not just something we do. It's not always about hosting the biggest party. It's a heart condition. It's living our lives and sharing ourselves with others, having lives of radical hospitality. Which means it's not about always getting it right. Like if you're going to host well, if you're going to live this life, then you're not going to do it perfect. You don't have to have the nicest house or the best food or the most space. It's simply a posture that is a willingness to say yes. A willingness to look for opportunities, to simply do as God asks us to do on a daily basis, even with the small things. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, we can still set a great environment, right? Preparing everything well and thinking it through and planning and creating spaces that unless people were invited into, they wouldn't want to come. But then once we've done all of that, we can sort of let the pressure off. We can sit back and let God work through the conversations and the relationships of the people that are there. Because God has an uncanny ability to take our feeble attempts at yes and at hosting and turn that into an amazing thing. This is actually part of what we're going to see in today's story. Today we're going to be in John chapter 2. And so you can begin to open your Bibles or prepare to read along with me on the screen here. But before we turn to John 2, I want to give you a little update on what's been happening in the life of Jesus at this point. You see, Jesus has begun his ministry. Now, when I say he's begun it, think of him maybe like an entrepreneur at this point, right? Like every good entrepreneur, when they have an idea for a business, they begin to dream it up. And one of the first things they have to do is recruit people into that dream. They have to recruit people to be on board. In other words, they have to cast vision. They have to go around to individuals and make their sales pitch. And so Jesus has been doing that. But here's Jesus' sales pitch. It's really, really simple. His sales pitch is, come and follow me. Come and follow me. And as you follow me, you'll begin to see what I do and what I believe in and begin to act and to think and to worship God like I do. So come and follow me. And we know of at least 4 individuals at this point that have said yes to that call. Nathaniel, Andrew, Peter, and Philip have all 4 said yes to the come and follow sales pitch. And so they're following Jesus, but in essence, there's no product come to market yet. Like nobody really knows that the ministry has started. And that's where we're going to pick up the story in John chapter 2. The next day, there was a wedding celebration in the village of Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the celebration. The wine supply ran out during the festivities, so Jesus' mother told him, "They have no more wine." "Dear woman, that's not our problem," Jesus replied. "My time has not yet come." But his mother told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing nearby were 6 stone water jars used for Jewish ceremonial washing. Each could hold 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus told the servants, "Fill the jars with water." When the jars had been filled, he said, "Now dip some out and take it to the master of ceremonies." So the servants followed his instructions. When the master of ceremonies tasted the water that was now wine, not knowing where it had come from, although the servants knew, he called the bridegroom over. "A host always serves the best wine first," he said. "Then, when everyone has had a lot to drink, he brings out the less expensive wine. But you have kept the best until now." This miraculous sign at Cana in Galilee was the first time Jesus revealed his glory, and his disciples believed him. What a great story. And I told you, like maybe this one isn't as rare as all the other ones, right? Because many of us know that Jesus turned water into wine. Like so many of us know that that is a part of the story of Jesus. But what we haven't necessarily looked at is the whys behind that, or some of the deeper things around it. And so that's what we're going to dig into. Now, there's more in this text than we have time to do online today. But there's a few things that I think we need to point out. Well, first, though, I want us to know like a little bit of where this is. Let's orient to the region. And so here we have a picture of Israel. And Nazareth, this place in red, that is where Jesus grew up. That is his hometown. And just north of there, about a 2-hour walk away, is Cana. This is where the wedding feast is happening. And in fact, here's a picture of Cana. It's a place that you can even go and visit today. You can go and be on the mountains around and look down and walk through the city. Like, this is a real place. And it's in the Eastern world. Now, the Eastern world today, even much more so today, or as much today as it was in Jesus' time, hospitality is a big deal. Like, hospitality and hosting people well and creating space and environments for them is a huge part of their culture, especially around social occasions and holidays, and yes, absolutely around weddings. Because in the Jewish culture, the wedding that's going on in Cana, it's not just a 1-day event or maybe a 2-day event. No, it is a 6 to 7 day event. Like, they would have a pre-party with all the family and the friends and coming into town and getting ready to celebrate. Somewhere on day 3 or 4 during the wedding feast and celebration, the actual ceremony would take place where they would have the wedding, and then they would have another few days of celebrating where the bride and groom would be showered and loved and cared for. You see, this is a huge party. It's for some people maybe a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and so you're supposed to host well and prepare for 6 to 7 days of celebration, and well, there's a problem. Because here they are after the wedding, maybe day 5 or 6, and they're out of wine. It's a party foul. Like you're not supposed to run out of wine. You were supposed to have prepared for this. And in steps Jesus' mom. Right? Mary steps in. Now she's there helping host this because most likely she's connected to the groom. It's one of the few explanations that scholars have of why Mary is involved. Remember, they're really close to Nazareth where they live, and so there's a strong possibility that this family in Cana is related to them. And so she's there to sort of help things happen, or to maybe just enjoy and make sure that honor is continued to pour out upon the family that is hosting. And she comes to Jesus and says, "Hey, we're out of wine." And then the miracle happens where Jesus turns water into wine, and Jesus provides the wine. You see, this points to the fact that radical hospitality meets tangible needs. Part of radical hospitality is meeting tangible needs. Jesus provides the wine. Now, not just any wine, right? He provides the best wine. We see that in the text where they're going, wait, normally we serve this wine in the beginning, and here it is at the end. Like, this is the best. Jesus is providing tangible needs. When you and I look to host well, we need to be looking for the physical, the tangible needs that we can meet of people. Or we can meet them in maybe the simplest of things, but how can we meet them in extravagant ways? Ways that go above and beyond. You may remember the ceremonial jars from this text, right? These ceremonial jars, they were used for washing your hands before or after a meal. And they were huge. In fact, we have a picture of it here. Like this is this one of the ceremonial jars. And yeah, the lady in the background, her face of surprise, I feel the same way when I see how big that is. It would have had to be carved out of one piece of stone. And they used this for the ceremonial jars because stone isn't porous, which meant it wasn't going to get dirty. And when it did, it was easily cleaned. Now, these were huge. And the fact that there's 6 or 7 of them at this wedding that are turned into wine means that Jesus turned 108 to 162 gallons of water into wine. That's equivalent of like 1,000 bottles of wine. You see, that's meeting a tangible need in extravagant ways. Jesus steps in and he goes, there's a tangible need here, and I'm going to meet it. I'm going to meet this need, but I'm not just going to meet it. I'm going to look for ways I can go above and beyond. And so when we strive to be people that live lives of radical hospitality, how can we meet tangible needs? Maybe it's providing food or water or shelter for someone. Maybe it is providing clothes or providing a place for them to come and to stay. Maybe it's a place for them to rent. I mean, even just this past year with all of the natural disasters that we had between the ice storms and the fires, like many of you opened up your homes to meet the tangible needs of people in our community. But may that not just be a one-time thing. May that be something that we continue to do, both with our lives and on the weekend. Like any given time here at the campus, you can come and we have 2 services so that you can attend one and serve one because there are tangible needs to meet. And so radical hospitality meets tangible needs. But there's a second thing. Let's go back to the story, right? There's the moment where Jesus is there enjoying the party with his friends and they run out of wine. The party foul happens. And then after that, Jesus' mom comes and says, hey, we are out of wine. I need you to do something about this. She's connected to the groom, right? She's trying to help them out. And why would she do this? Because they live in an honor-shame culture. They live in a culture where if you are the host of the party and you run out of wine, that is going to bring shame upon your family. Not only your family, but the master of ceremonies, who's a wedding coordinator of sorts, whose job it is to make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen. And so it's going to fall on Mary. The shame's going to fall on the wedding coordinator. The shame's going to fall on the groom. And no one wants to start their marriage off on the bad foot. His honor needs to be protected and guarded. So Jesus turns water into wine. Because you see, radical hospitality meets social needs. Hospitality has always been a social thing. And when you and I host people well, we tell people that we see them, that they have honor, dignity, that we recognize their worth and their common humanity. And you see, we don't have to agree on all things and in all ways to tell people that we believe that they are beloved children of God, that are made in his image, and that they have value and that they have worth. No matter their background or their preferences or their disagreements or their creeds or their agreed to disagreements, right? We can come and show honor to people by the way that we serve them and show them hospitality. This has always been a hallmark of our faith. You see, hospitality has always included hosting family and friends and influential people. Look throughout history, hospitality has always included those things. But the Christian contribution was the emphasis on including the neediest people among us, those who could not return the favor, those that needed the help. This didn't diminish hospitality, it actually deepened it and broadened it. This wedding couple cannot repay the gift that Jesus is giving them. They can't repay 1,000 bottles of wine. They also can't repay their honor being covered by Jesus. Because when you meet someone's needs and you give them honor and dignity, you are meeting a social need. So where can you meet a social need this week? Maybe it's in friendship or kindness to someone. Maybe it's giving somebody a word of encouragement. It's advocacy on behalf of someone that doesn't have a voice. It's the listening ear. It's looking someone in the eyes and saying, I believe you. It's buying them coffee. It's a smile. It's the moment when someone leaves your company for good or for bad reasons. And they know that as they leave, they were still cared for and loved well, if not by the company, at least by the way you treated them while they were there and as they were leaving. And so radical hospitality meets social needs. It gives people honor and dignity by creating a space for them. But then there's a third thing. The third thing is that radical hospitality meets spiritual needs. Now, to understand this, we've got to go back to the jars. Right? The jars that were, remember these huge earthen jars. If you remember, I said they were used for religious ceremonial purposes. And Jesus is repurposing them. You see, these jars, they would have been a part of keeping the Old Testament laws. It was a part of the way for the people to stay clean, that they would come and before entering into someone's house or entering into the temple or before a meal, they would wash their hands. And yes, that's absolutely tangible and physical, but for them, it was deeply spiritual as well. The ceremonial jars at the wedding were there to maintain social purity and right standing with God and the covenant community. But the thing about doing that is you have to do it over and over and over and over and over again. You have to continually cleanse yourself one after another after another. And Jesus comes in and he says, hey, I am doing a new thing. I am going to do something once and for all people. That I'm going to come in and remind you, take this thing that was once meant to remind you of the dirt and the grime and your failure to uphold the law, and I am now going to bring in this idea of joy and grace and peace and party to you. And in fact, we don't have time to get into this, but there's this little fun nuance in the text that the Jewish audience would have understood. You see, when they were in exile back in Egypt, in slavery in the Old Testament, as they were about to come out of that, Moses shows up on the scene. And one of the ways that he shows that God is on the side of Israel is he turns the water there, that is the Nile River, into blood. He turns the water into blood. And the text in Exodus says it's not just the water in the Nile, that everything in the cisterns and the stone jars was also turned into blood. And so the Israelites would have had in their mind this idea of that water turning into something other than water was God's judgment upon them. But here Jesus shows up and he says, no, I'm turning water into wine because I'm doing something new, a spiritual blessing that will bring joy. By covering the shame of the family at Cana with this new wine, Jesus was foreshadowing how he would pour out his own blood and cover our shame and give us the new spirit at Pentecost. You see, as much as radical hospitality is about tangible and social, it's also about spiritual. That as we host people well in our lives, we would look to meet their spiritual needs. So maybe looks like beginning to do family worship together. A time that you just pause and pray together and maybe sing some songs. A time of praying for other people that when you would meet them, like the monks in Scotland, that when they come, you would get to know their name. And one of the things that no one would leave your house without you praying for them first. Maybe it's a kind word to someone. It's pointing them to Jesus. It's forgiving them. It's celebrating them. It's mourning with them. It's inviting them into your home community. It's leading out this fall in Rooted. You see, there's so many ways that we can host well and hit the spiritual needs. And so we see that radical hospitality is both tangible, social, and spiritual. But that feels like a daunting task. Like, how am I supposed to live out that kind of radically hospitable life? Well, the answer to that is in the text too. Maybe you remember that moment where Mary ignores her son's request, right? There's that moment where she goes, hey, they're out of wine. The party foul has happened. Like, Jesus, you need to do something. And here's his response in verse 4. Dear woman, that's not our problem. Now, before we go too far, let me just explain what Jesus is doing here, because to our ears, this doesn't sound good. In fact, this text says, dear woman, because they're trying to help you understand Jesus isn't being rude, but other texts simply say woman there, which I, for one, am glad that they're putting dear woman here. This would have been a sign of honor to Mary. It was a way in their culture and their society to bring honor to the women around them. In fact, it's the same phrase that when Jesus is on the cross in John chapter 19, verse 26, that it says, when Jesus saw his mother standing there beside the disciple that he loved, he said to her, dear woman, here is your son. And so Jesus is saying, hey, I'm going to give you the honor and respect. But then he's also kind of putting his finger on a spiritual aspect of what he's about to do when he says, hey, it's not our problem. In other words, he's saying, listen, this is a wedding feast problem. Like, why are we involving me? I'm here to do my Father's work. My ministry is just beginning. But what I love about Mary is she ignores him. Like I like to think in this moment that when he says, like, how does this involve me? She gave him that mom bug-eyed stare. She's like, you know exactly how this involves you, right? She didn't have to say any of that, but she just gave him that look that every mom knows and that every kid has received from mom. And then Jesus was like, you're right, I should do something. And apparently she saw that, because then in verse 5, what does she do? She turns and she says this to the servants. But this mother told this to the servants: do whatever he tells you. Do whatever he tells you. You see, if you and I are going to live lives that are radically hospitable, this is what we do. We are the servants that do whatever Jesus tells us. We just begin to live our lives in a way that is pursuing after God in all that we are. And when God asks us to say yes, even to a simple, small thing, we say yes. And we live lives and we posture ourselves to live this way. You see, Jesus used the servants. Look at what he says to them. He told the servants, fill the jars with water. When the jars had been filled, he said, now dip some out and take it to the master of ceremonies. So the servants followed his instructions. You see, Jesus used the servants in the same way that he can use you and me. And what's so fascinating about this is there's no fanfare. Like, there's not this moment where Jesus goes, okay, everybody gather around, come one, come all. Okay, here we go for my first party trick. No, it's not extravagant, it's simple. He takes the jars that are already there, the parts of their life that they were already familiar with and they already knew. And he simply looks at the servants and he says, fill them back up. Fill them back up. Now go and dip and go serve that. Like, it's so simple, we almost miss that it's a miracle. You see, hospitality is not so much a task as a way of living our lives and sharing ourselves. And it can be that simple. It can be the simple things in life, the things that we already have around us. We don't have to alter everything to begin to live this way. We just have to begin to look for the opportunities where Jesus is creating space for us to do this. That we see God on the move, we see him working, and we step in and say, yes, God, like the servants, use me, use what is here, use what I have, make this be a part of my life. And when we do that, we begin to understand that hospitality is not about us. It's not about us getting the credit as people that host well. In fact, at the wedding, like, Jesus doesn't even get the credit. The wine is taken out, it's taken to the master of ceremony, and he gives credit to the groom for it. Like, Jesus isn't concerned with the credit. He's going, no, this is about loving people well and meeting their tangible needs, their social needs, and their spiritual needs in ways that they may not even understand yet. You know, there's a ministry of our church that we've just begun to partner with, and I'm so excited about them. They're called Know Me Now. And it's a great way for us as a church to exercise radical hospitality. You see, what we do is we partner with a few different prisons around. And as incarcerated individuals come out of prison, we've met them online. There's a whole team of people that meets them online and gets to know them. These individuals have at least a kid in foster care as a result of them going into prison. And we're trying to say, hey, listen, your worst day doesn't have to be the defining day of the rest of your life. And so these individuals, as this person comes out of prison, rally around them and they provide physical needs. They go, hey, how can we help you get your driver's license back? Like, how can we help you register your car? Do you need food? Do you need shelter? They meet the social needs that are there. They say, hey, listen, we know that you are coming out of prison and so much of society wants that to be a black mark on you, but we see you as someone that has worth and value and dignity, not just in the eyes of God, but in the eyes of us as your fellow human beings. And so we want to meet you in this moment and love you well. And while we're doing that, we are going to be praying for you and caring for you and inviting you into our lives. And because of who we are, there's going to be spiritual conversations that are there. But it started with a group of people that simply said yes. And we can all do that. You don't have to host the huge party or buy the best wine. You just have to show up every day with a posture of radical hospitality. And when we do that, then like the servants in the story, we get to see the miracles happen. And we get to see the things happen that have the undeniable kingdom impact. Would you pray with me? God, we just come before you, and I thank you today for this great first miracle of Jesus. God, that he did it so that his glory would be demonstrated. So God, as we live lives that are radically hospitable, would we do it so that your glory is demonstrated? God, today and this week, would you help me to see and to look for opportunities to step in, that this wouldn't just be something that I do, it would be a way of life that I live. And then I do that because of Jesus. It's in his name that we pray this. Amen. Thanks for joining us today. I hope that you enjoyed this, and we really do. Those links that I mentioned earlier, they're right there. If you want to trust in Jesus, because he can cover all of our shame and all of our guilt, and he has in his resurrection, then we would love to know that. If you need some prayer this week, then we want to help you do that. Or if you just simply want to reach out and say hello, we have a team of people that would love to connect with you, get to know your story and who you are. Thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you online next week.